Vamos a llamar también a Carol Sanford, de escritora del libro The Responsible Business. Carol cree que las empresas pueden desempeñar un papel importante en la creación de un mundo mejor. Ella ha trabajado con empresas desde hace 4 décadas que han concluido con éxito la construcción de grandes negocios. Entonces, voy a llamar a Carol, por favor, que esté aquí con nosotros en el escenario para hacer su presentación también. Muchísimas gracias, Carol. Bienvenida. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. We are here, and I'm very excited to be a part of the Impact Investing Conference. As we all know, every investment, every expenditure has an impact. And the question is on the scale of what? So I'm here to talk to you about huge impact investing. When I think about the impacts that we can make compared to what sometimes we do make, I think sometimes it's just a matter of not quite understanding what it would take to literally change the world. How many of you have said something like, well, my business is about changing the world? Any of you said that? Yeah, so maybe a third in here. But I bet some of you have just had that thought. What I want to do, and I know we're going to hear from some folks who are doing that, they see themselves as changing the world. I have been an entrepreneur. I have founded 2 businesses and sold them. We have music. Shall we dance? I don't think we need the music. Thank you. I can. I have also coached and consulted with businesses, over 100 of them, who wanted to move from making a few $1 million to a 10x return on that over a 10-year period. I've also been an educator in universities like John Kohler and have worked with thousands of students, most of whom I have tracked. What is this? Do we know why we have music? Click this.
The parade's at the night, but let me just see. What is?
Excuse me, I'm going to wait. Is that all right? We're going to wait just a minute. Because I'm having trouble hearing me.
No, I don't think so.
I will. We will dance.
Okay.
All right. There is a party tonight. All right, back to where we are. So I've been involved as an entrepreneur. I've been involved as a coach and a consultant. I've been involved as an educator in universities, including Harvard, MIT, Stanford University, and I've tracked my students for decades to see what happened to them. I have also sit on the board of foundations who make decisions, and I sat as a judge on many panels to decide whether to fund folks like you. And every one of them have something great to offer and holes in it so I can see it all. Plus, I'm an impact investor as a part of a fund in Seattle. That music is just persistent, yeah. So I think that I want to bring to you today, I love what we heard from the previous folks, and we do look extensively at the business cases, at the strategy, at the market plans, but I want to talk to you about the 3 things that I believe are the predictors of whether or not entrepreneurs will succeed. So if you are an entrepreneur, this gives you guidance on how it is I think about educating entrepreneurs, but it also is what we use as impact investors to decide what it is we fund. Have I done something again, Fabricio? Did I do something?
It's like the hotel system. They are checking out right now.
Okay.
If you want to just for a few minutes, not to
I'll
interrupt
pause.
your
Okay,
participation.
I can pause.
Yeah,
But I would
think
rather
it's better.
dance with someone if we're going to do that. All right, so stay still for just a moment, and we'll pick up where we are. You really want to know those 3 predictors now, right? So you got to stay so you can find out what they are, because one of the things that each of the other 3 folks have talked about is how it is the entrepreneur we're investing in. What it is that they are able to know and do, and that's what we look at. We do look at the business plans and the strategies, but we look at the person and persons who are part of something, and that's what I think are the core. All right, I'm supposed to be waiting, aren't I? I'm not good at waiting. It's getting... You can hear me? You like the music with it?
I'm so sorry, Carol.
You like the music with it? Okay. All right, my words are like music. I love it. All right.
Okay, so if you want, they're checking it out.
Okay,
so
I'm going to
I
keep
think that
going.
in a few minutes, perfect.
You think
you
so?
do whatever
okay.
you want.
All right. In order, though, to talk to you about those 3 predictors, I need to give you my definition of entrepreneurship. It says I have 13 minutes left, and I just started. All right, so first, I think all entrepreneurs are great human beings, don't you? It is amazing to have the energy it takes to generate something that we want to put into the world. I define an entrepreneur, all of them, as holding in themselves something called personal agency. That is, they have will, they have self-motivation. When things feel like they're not working, they figure it out and they turn it around to make it work. That's in all entrepreneurs. They also, for the most part, put something of themselves into it. If I invited each of you to talk about whether or not what you care about and who you are is in it, I could tell you immediately whether or not you're going to be a good entrepreneur. Because if you're doing it by somebody else's standards, by all the best practices, I guarantee you, you will not be able to sustain what it takes to get there. Does that make sense? There is, in addition to that, what's now called social entrepreneur. And you'll find out in a moment, I'm actually not a big fan of social entrepreneurs. So I'll tell you what I am a fan of. So the reason is that I believe they all have personal agency also. They also have what I call external considering, which is they think about something beyond themselves. You know, my grandmother used to say to me when I was young and did something very bad, she would say, "Didn't you consider anyone else?" And of course, I hadn't. But social entrepreneurs are externally considering. My concern is that they are often issue-based. They are working on a small piece of something that doesn't necessarily remove the bigger question that needs, or face what needs to be dealt with. They often also drop out their unique expression. They become captured and excited about the external considering, which is very important, but they lose themselves, and without yourself in it, my fund will not fund you. What I am looking for is something called the responsible entrepreneur. Responsible entrepreneur has that personal agency. It has that set of will. It has what psychologists call internal locus of control. That is, I know that whatever happens, good or bad, I get to take responsibility for it. They also care about the external considering, but they're making big promises to do things that change an entire industry, change a social system, change a cultural paradigm. So I call them big promise entrepreneurs, big promises to change the world. And they have their own essence, their uniqueness embedded. So for me, the question that really matters when I'm listening to someone present, when someone comes and they're doing their 3-minute pitch, I want to follow up and I want to find out, what is your personal agency like? Do you rise to something even when it feels like it's almost impossible to face it? Can you do your own self-motivating? Do you know who you are or your investors are, and all of you have your uniqueness in it while you're connecting to something greater than yourself? So this building of personal agency is is sometimes a challenge for us. I'm sure all of you get discouraged as well. I mean, I know I even do. The question is whether we can come back to it. Now, I have found when I listen to entrepreneurs a particular thing that seems to show up repeatedly, and actually not just me, anthropologists have found it, which is that when they need to get their own energy lifted, they pull into their mind someone else or something else that they say, what would X do? How many of you are named after a grandparent that you use sometime to pull up in your mind when you need to think about something? Yeah, so we have, again, another handful of people. There are others that will seek icons. You know, what would Buddha do? What would Jesus do? And you put those thoughts in your mind, and they lift you. We have found that when we ask the question to entrepreneurs, what do you do to do self-motivating, re-energizing? They repeatedly refer to someone else that reminds them who they are and what they can stand for. My story is, I learned this from my grandfather, so it made sense to me. My grandfather is Mohawk Indian. And his great-grandfather covered the tier of trails, if you know about it, in the United States, where over half of the native peoples died as they moved them to reservations in Oklahoma. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was a part of that. But my grandfather, when he would tell me about it, would tell me about the archetypes that they used to rebuild a nation. And I have found when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, they are often drawing on one of these. But I want to quickly share with you what it means in my world, and I will show you how I think it fits with return on investment, giving a really big impact, and being able to grow a company, which is very important, since if it can't grow itself over time, you can't stay in business. It's always sitting too low an edge. So what he would talk about is a warrior archetype, who are the ones who really see a reality and ask, what do we stand for? A clown archetype, the court jester. Where's Ian? There he is, right? Who gives us a sense of seeing that which others don't see, pointing out something that is not visible. The hunter, who really looks at the reciprocity and the whole of a system. And finally, a head man, or I add, head woman. What my grandfather would say to me is all four of those needed to exist. Now, this may look really far removed from the idea of entrepreneurship, but I think if you think about it for not very long, you will discover that when you are lifting yourself up, you often are seeing yourself playing one of those archetypal roles for your nation, for your community. You are taking on something that's bigger. And what my grandfather would say to me is you have to have all four of them in order to regenerate. Now, just to show you how this is not old, I want to share with you that I believe it is how modern archetypes have become filled with personal agency. So you'll recognize these United States and United Kingdom figures, right? So my new book tells a lot of stories about them, the responsible entrepreneur, but what we found in talking with each of them is they have someone they use archetypally to lift them up. So if when I'm interviewing people to fund them, they can't tell me how they lift themselves and how they are nourished by others as an archetype, I worry about their personal agency, because they may not have a way to pull them out of the hole they get in. So this is the important piece I want to ask you to think about when I look at funding and I look at teaching the entrepreneurs is how big a promise are they looking at changing? I see four arenas I ask you to think about with your business. And if you're coming to me to be funded, I make a decision and we make a decision about whether it's a big enough promise. Are you thinking about actually changing an industry? So Duval said, we'll be back here in a few years and we'll look at hacking business. Why a few years? Why not now? Why not think about, and we ask people, how are you going to do something that is so great and so useful to the whole that it will actually change the industry? So we expect that. We expect to be thinking that big when they start. Or we ask them, are you going to be changing a social system? So very often we work, especially philanthropy, and I do sit on boards of philanthropic organizations. People will come in and they're seeking to ameliorate misery, which is good. We need to do that. But why aren't we going back upstream to what causes the misery? Why don't we change the system? So we ask people, tell us either an industry you're working on changing, or tell us a social system you're going to go all the way back upstream to the causal part and move that. Or sometimes it's a cultural paradigm. You might have noticed, let me just point it out if you didn't, that Steve Jobs changed how many industries? Anybody got a guess? We know of at least 5, and it's still unfolding, right? So, and he set out to do that. He didn't set out just to give everybody a computer, but to change our lives. Richard Branson, it turns out, set out to change many social systems, particularly transportation safety. In the UK, Paul, where are you? In the UK, he was not required to actually build to the level that they knew how to on the Pendolino train or on the airplanes, but he demanded that they do that even though it was 3x, and the transportation industry tried to stop him. And he said, then you're willing to allow a certain number of people to die every time there's an accident. He finally convinced them. He changed the social regulatory system, and when the first Pendolino train went downhill, no one died, even though it rolled and rolled and rolled, because he stood for that. Cultural paradigms Oprah's been doing for years, because she's been questioning whether it's all right to be gay, whether it's all right to be black, and whether black girls in Africa can ever lead. And then the final one is governing agreements, which Larry Page out of Google has done repeatedly, very quietly. People don't even know it's happening, where he's changing all of the regulations about how you go public, where he's changing how the SEC can redistribute broadband. Now, here are my modern folks. I have been interviewing and finding people who are and these are a mixture of students, clients, and colleagues, all of whom have done something that will likely end up at the same level that Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, Oprah Winfrey, and Larry Page have done. I'm going to give you just a really, really quick story. On the bottom, I've changed the name, so I don't call him Warrior. I call the Warrior now a realization entrepreneur. And the reason is because they see realities the rest of us don't see. I want to tell you a brief story about Sarah Slaughter, who is at the bottom here, who became an MIT professor. But what she was doing was trying to get green building in place. And in fact, she laid all the groundwork for LEED. Any of you involved in LEED or building LEED buildings? You owe Sarah a lot. So Sarah was trying to get green building, but she was standing one day on the 86th floor in Boston of a building watching an iron worker out on the end who was not chained to anything. And it suddenly occurred to her that the reason the union would not allow them to build green is that everything they were pushing would decrease safety. So she built a very sophisticated software system that combined green with safety and showed the construction industry how they could drop their costs over about the next 5 years by about 50%. It's a pretty big change, and it made it possible for the whole industry really to believe that they could change. And LEED had a foundation because they had the unions behind them. Another person who's over here, the reconnection entrepreneur, is Kip Baratov. Kip is another one who has created a technology that has taken the fishing industry, starting in Oregon on the coast, and put together the entire what I call value-adding process. So the boat that goes out, the people who process it, the people who can it, the people who distribute it are all in teams around a place. Plus, technologically, they enter exactly where that fish is caught, who processes it, where it's distributed, and when you enter a grocery store, there's a QR code which you can scan that shows you who that boat captain was, including his picture. There is one woman, but mostly it's men. And how all the way along you can know, including what the mineral content is of that piece of fish you're picking up right now. That's pretty exciting. Well, what's happening in Costco and in other grocery stores is they now want all their suppliers to do that. All of them. So it's going to change very rapidly how it is that groceries go out into the world. On the top up here, we have a couple of other amazing people. I call them reciprocity entrepreneurs because they make us understand we all are dependent on one another. And on the top there is a guy named Mikkel Bakker. He's actually Dutch, but he works in Google. So some of these are internal entrepreneurs also. Mikkel has decided he wants to change our relationship with food using Google's platform. And guess what? Google's fine with that. Not Google food, although that's included, but on the planet, how it is we deal with food. So he has pulled together an innovation lab, which I get to participate in, and they're actually using my work, which is unbelievably exciting to me, to be able to look at how it is that all food along the entire value-adding process has to be thought of as one thing. So he has farmers, he also has Nestle's involved and Unilever and people who are hugely impacting food. And of course, Google being a technological company, they're now creating projects of all sorts which can transform that, and given that it's Google, it will change the industry. The final brief story I would tell you over here is Jay Cohen. How many of you know about B Corps? Great, all right. So Jay is one of the 3 guys who founded B Corps, but they had a very bumpy ride, and they didn't start out to change all of corporate America, but they are, and eventually beyond. He was first denied in California, and Schwarzenegger, who vetoed the bill which would allow them to consider impact on others, said, I want you to actually go create a different kind of corporation, or we wouldn't have B Corp. The B Lab was trying to find a way, and Schwarzenegger denying them legislation made them become more creative. 22 states now accept it, and as Jay says, our next one will be A corporations, and we don't know what that stands for, but we know we're on our way to the beginning. These people are chartering themselves to change business, not just to create a social entrepreneur, but they all have an extraordinary amount of personal agency. They all are seeking to make big promises, to make big changes. They all have their own uniqueness, and I didn't have time to give you all of that story, but they're all pretty amazing human beings. Oh, okay. So my criteria when we're really determining whether we're going to impact something is that I think the return on investment really emerges when your uniqueness is there. Because products don't sell unless people can see them differentiated. So the innovation comes there. Growth comes because we have personal agency, those of you who won't give up. And I can see it quickly when I'm interviewing an entrepreneur or a team of entrepreneurs. Therefore, I'm really after a responsible entrepreneur which puts all of those into play. So I have some questions for you. I would like for you to think just here a moment. What is the domain that you feel like you want to change or need to? Do you see yourself changing an industry? Do you see yourself changing a social system? And by the way, you don't have to pick just one of these. Do you see yourself changing cultural paradigms and what people believe, or how people go back and connect with their governing agreements? I want you to move from arresting disorder, making something less bad and filling in the gaps, to creating a whole new order. That's what I think we have to do, because we have to go a bit faster. And is your uniqueness of you and your team of owners and the investors with you, can you see you in it and how you're bringing something unique to it? And is your own personal agency and your own locus of control really strong so that you can raise yourself up again? So I have one last offer. I have one copy of my book I've been carrying around, and I don't want to carry it home. These things are heavy. So Fabrizio and I decided that if you'll give him a card or give me one, he's going to do a drawing, and we'll give this away this afternoon, as well as one for my new book, which will be out shortly. So that's just a gift. I hope you'll let us know, and then we'll stay in touch. And thank you so very, very, very much. And I enjoyed the dancing part, too.